This week we have a double Parashat Matot and Masei, and in the Parashat Matot, in the first part, it's talking about a very interesting episode. We had two tribes that they wanted to stay on the other side of Jordan. They didn't want to cross. They wanted to build special houses for their animals, for their businesses, and for their kids. And they wanted to stay there because it had bigger pastures, it had the green grass. It was beautiful, it was spacious. And they approached Moshe Rabbeinu with this request. Moshe Rabbeinu, our teacher Moses, got very upset. He said, "What are you trying to do? What are you saying? Like, you're repeating the same mistake that we experienced 40 years ago when the Meraglim, when the spies, they went to spy out the land. They came and they brought a negative report. And the Jewish people, they had low morale. They really got depressed. They didn't want to go into the land of Israel. And as a result, God says, okay, you don't want to go, don't go. You're going to wander for 40 years and you're going to die in the desert. And that's exactly what happened. And Moshe Rabbeinu said, why are you causing your brothers and to be disappointed in the land of Israel again? You're repeating the same mistake. And they said, Moshe Rabbeinu, it's not true. You didn't understand us correctly. We are not separating ourselves from the rest of Jewish nation. We're gonna go with everybody, and we're gonna fight for the land of Israel. We're gonna wait till everybody gets their portion, and then we're gonna come back to our wives and children and continue living on the other side of Jordan. And Moshe Rabbeinu accepted their request, and he posed the certain conditions, and he says, you fulfill the conditions, then you could do it. The pasuk, the Torah tells us like this: "V'yigshu elav v'yomru gidrod tzon nivne lemikneinu po." They approached him and they told him that we would like to build certain pens, right? We would like to build like farms for our livestock. And then the pasuk continues, says, "Ve'arim letapenu," and we'd like also to build cities, meaning infrastructure for our children. So first they said, we'd like to build infrastructure for our livestock, for our animals, which they had a lot of animals, and that was their main business. And then we would like to build schools and different housing, everything for our children. So the Medrash Tanhuma is treating the tribes of Reuven and tribes of Gad very harshly. He says like this: "She'asu ha'ikar tafel." They took something which is a priority in life and they made it secondary. "V'hatafel ikar," and then they took something which is not is not significant. It's not the primary item, and they made it into the most important item. They basically mixed up their priorities. How so? Because first, when they drafted the request for Moshe Rabbeinu, they put their animals and their livestock and their business first, and then they put their families and themselves. And the Medrash says this is not a good approach. That somebody who doesn't have his priorities straightened out, ein bo bracha, he's not going to have a blessing from Hashem, because a person's family and person's life has to take priority over his career, over his business, over chasing the monetary things. Obviously, we're not talking here about that a person should be poor as a mouse and he should not have nothing, and obviously that's also not going to work. A person's needs have to be met. He has to have food on the table, he has to have a roof over his head, he has to be able to get from A to B. But if the person is driving Honda or Mercedes, it doesn't mean that the guy that is driving Mercedes is necessarily as much happier than the guy that is driving the Honda. Right? There's a certain level of necessities that has to be met, but beyond that level, the happiness is not guaranteed. And in many cases, just the opposite. The person who is his priority in life is building wealth, he might neglect his family, he might neglect his health, he might neglect important things in life and make chasing after the worldly possession. He might make this his number one priority. I want to say that those of us that are Shabbat observant are very, very lucky, because we have already a mechanism that is protecting us from this issue to some extent. All right, because some of us are very ambitious, and if we could work 7 days a week, we would. But God told us, don't work 7 days a week. Work 6 days a week, and the number 7 is rest. It's not for shopping. It's not to take your car to a car wash. It's not to mow your lawn. It's the time that you're supposed to have 3 meals with your family. That's the time that you put on a nice suit, a nice dress. Before Shabbat starts, you light the candles, you shower. It's a beautiful day, and it already creates room for us to connect with the people we love, to connect with our inner self. And then there is another application of this concept of making our children a priority in life, and that is Jewish education. Jewish education, we know in the United States it's not cheap. It could cost anywhere between $500 to like $3,000 a month, depending on the school you send your child to. So it could be quite a challenge. It's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do. But again, with this week's Torah portion tells us, look at the tribes of Reuven and Gad. Money is not everything. And the education of our children is super important. It should be the priority number 1 in our lives. And Baruch Hashem, today there are quite a few schools that make it very accessible, that they made specially for children that are coming from public schools. They're very accommodating. There are organizations, I know Queens is very big on this, that they help children from public schools transfer into Jewish schools, and they will find every single one, they'll help to find a way to pay for the tuition. So for anybody who has it on his mind that my child should be in Jewish school, he'll find a way. There are ways to pull it off. And some of us can really afford it. Some of us, driving very, very expensive cars, vacationing at very expensive vacation places, and nevertheless they send their children to public schools. We see from this week's Parashat that's not the right way to go. It's not a smart way to go. A person has to prioritize his children over his money. And a lot of times, years later, they come to rabbis and they say, Rabbi, help me. The child is going out, their son is going out with a non-Jewish girl. It's getting very serious. They live together. He's planning to propose. He's planning to marry her, and the children, they're going berserk. They don't know what to do. Well, the consequences of our decision and the consequences of our priorities sometimes are felt years later. There's nothing. You get nothing for nothing, right? Everything has a cost. Everything has a cost, and when we save money, we think we save money on Jewish education. It could result in different costs which we cannot see right now. Sometimes it takes years down the line. But even the child marries within his nation, within the faith, still the strength of the traditions, the strength of the knowledge. You cannot compare somebody who went to Jewish school and somebody who didn't go to Jewish school. The knowledge that they have, that they're able to walk into any synagogue, pick up a prayer book, pick up a Torah and Chumash, and be able to read it. They know what it's like. They know the tradition. They know everything about the holidays, and they know the history. So you can't compare. And obviously, we have to make sure that our children is our number 1 priority, like we see in this week's Torah portion, that even such a holy people like the tribe of Reuven and the tribe of Gad, they didn't have it correctly. And if they made such a mistake, even more so we're prone to making such mistakes in prioritizing things in our life. So I give a blessing to everybody listening to this, that we should have a good priorities in life. That the important things should be number 1, and the less important things should be less important things, and we should never, God forbid, mix the ikar and tafel, what's primary and what's secondary. Shabbat Shalom.